Welcome to the Fire Nuggets Framework podcast with Jay Bonnifield and me, Nick Papa. Our intent is tapping into expertise to capture tangible fireground takeaways. By interviewing experienced professionals, we aim to extract their tacit knowledge and intuitive judgments to provide you with a better understanding of the fireground and actionable insights to apply to your next fire. For the sixth episode, we are rejoined by our guest, retired Seattle Deputy Chief Phil Jose. In the last episode, Chief Jose explained tactical decision-making games and how they can be applied to the fire service. If you missed the fifth episode, I highly recommend that you take a pause, listen to that fifth episode, and then rejoin us for episode 6. For part 2, Chief Jose will be walking us through a TDG. Welcome back to the show, Chief.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick. Jay, appreciate being here and always happy to talk tactics.
Sounds good. We're looking forward to it.
All right, so you ready to go, Nick?
Let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to just brief you as I would just running a TDG if I was running one online or in person. This would be the online version, obviously. So what you're seeing here, this is kind of going to be our map. I'm going to give you a layout of the building that's on fire, and I'm going to try and give you everything that you would normally know about the building. So you're on International Boulevard and Second Avenue. Um, and this is going to be our target building. It's an apartment building with 3 stories and a sort of a half basement or daylight basement. It's a full basement, but it's not all the way underground. This is your main entrance here, and then you have 2 other stairwells. This is your exposure building on this side, and this side is just a parking lot and that kind of stuff. I'll show you some pictures now, give you a little bit of the lay of the land. So this is we're looking at this is your entry door. Before we're gonna our position where we're gonna look at it, it's gonna be back here, and that's because that's where we're gonna use the video. That's where the video is shot from, is over there. So this in this drawing that we have here, this is we're looking from this spot right here. Okay,
Okay.
so that's the building itself. You can see this little half basement down here, 3 floors, and then there's a rooftop deck. This is that the next corner. So our viewpoint is going to be over here, and um, that's going to be the building itself. And then this is sort of the look at the side. There's a little precursor to what might happen
Mhm.
for you. That exposure building, obviously, you can see it's relatively tight.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of the layout of the building itself. Any questions about the building, Nick?
No, it looks pretty straightforward.
Okay. Not unlike some stuff you would have there.
Yeah, similar. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So here you go. You're going to be Chief One. Your response is engine 41, engine 42, engine 43, engine 44, engine 45, ladder 41, ladder 42, Deputy Chief One. And I understand you don't have a battalion chief coming behind you, so we can just disregard that. The address is Second Avenue and International Boulevard. On your way there, you're told by the dispatchers that the fire was reported by the construction supervisor who's on the location. He arrived in the morning to find smoke on floor 2. So this is early morning. He arrived to sort of open up the site, smoke on floor 2. No workers had entered the site prior to his arrival. And in the meantime, the dispatchers have begun getting multiple calls. So that's information received on the way. Before you arrived, Engine 41 got there first. They reported a heavy fire on floor 2, rapidly extending up with an exposure on the Charlie side. Engine 41 is stretching a pre-connect, engine 3/4 attack line to floor number 2. Engine 42 was directed to provide a supply for engine 41 and stretch a backup line to floor number 2. Ladder 41 arrived and they positioned on the Alpha Bravo corner. All members are going to the roof. When you get there, additional from the construction supervisor, when you get there, he's telling you that the sheetrock's been removed from most of the floors. About 50% remains. Within each floor, there's no doors on the apartments. The stairwells are protected by stairway access doors. There's no contents up there except for construction materials and maybe like a break room, something like that, but basically empty. of your normal couches, chairs, beds, etc. It tells you the plumber contractor was there last night, late working. Right? Any questions about that information?
Nope.
Okay. So here's the setup, and this is the kind of board you'll use. Your next engines will all be coming in down here on Second Avenue. So I can just pull these engines. You're going to tell me where to position them. So that's the rig, and this is the crew. And so you can see engine 41 came over here. They went up this main entry stairwell to floor number 2. Backup line from engine 42 went to the same floor. Those are both operating off that rig. This is how your supply with 42 is on this hydrant, and then pumping the engine 41. Ladder 41 positioned on the corner and sent their crew to the roof per the directive of the first arriving engine officer, who was the incident commander. This is going to be you, just because that's where our position for our camera is. This is our Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta.
Okay.
Okay, any questions?
No, I think I got everything.
Okay, this is what it looks like on your arrival. I'm going to give you when I stop the video, I'm going to give you 1 minute, and then you should take over as if you are taking over at this incident scene.
Mhm.
Radio calls, orders for the next 2 arriving engines, who are going to be roughly about a minute and a half to 2 minutes. The first one is basically right on you, so a minute and a half behind.
Mhm.
45 will be right behind them. So you should assume the command, or take over as you normally would. As soon as I stop the video, you'll get 1 minute. Any questions about that, Nick?
No.
Okay, here you go.
All right. Dispatch Deputy Chief 1 is on scene. I have a 3-story wood frame multiple dwelling under construction. I've got a heavy body of fire on floor 2, showing from sides or sides Delta and Charlie. Uh, Strike a second alarm, and Deputy Chief 1 will be command.
Okay, give me some engine 43 is arriving.
Okay. Engine 43, I need you to establish a secondary water supply, hitting the hydrant on Second Avenue and laying up. Leave room for ladder 42. On completion, you're going to stretch another line to the 3rd floor.
Okay, just clarification. Are you intending them to go through that door or this door?
They can go through the Charlie side door.
Okay, was that your intent?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so something like that with 43 going into that door. Did you I won't ask if you did because I already know. Give me anything else you want to do on the radio before 44 arrives?
No, because truck 42 is still a little bit behind, right?
Yeah, you're not going to assign them.
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
want but you're good. You're good with everything else.
Yeah, I'm good with them as long as they got room for the truck company to set up, and they're entering in from another point of entry, since we got 2 lines going in the front.
Okay, 44 is arriving.
Okay, and engine 44, I need you to position your rig out of the way and report to the front of the building with personnel and equipment set up as RIT.
Engine 44 RIT. Okay. Um, Anything else you want to do before I start asking you questions?
All right. I mean, just at this point, with the volume of fire that I have, with the auto exposure going on, the exposure hazard nearby, I would strike an additional alarm.
Right, you already asked for a second, so
Yeah.
I'd be working to get you those companies. But
Yeah.
as far as the setup as we have it right now, the situation as you inherited it, plus
Hmm.
what you've done so far, any other radio calls or information you want, or anything from the command side?
I just want to get a can report from the units operating on two, as well as what's going on in the roof.
Okay, let's do that.
All right. Engine 41 from command, can report.
You get no answer.
All right. Engine 42 from command, can report.
Also no answer.
All right. I'd repeat that transmission one more time to 41 and 42.
Okay, so 41, you do get a response, but it's you cannot understand it. The voice is highly stressed.
All right. Uh, all right. I would in that case I would use the officer's first name to try and calm him down and see if I can get an actual like audible transmission from them that I can understand.
Okay, what do you think is happening inside the building right
They're combating a heavy body of fire, and they're probably actively trying to advance in, and they're taking a beating, I'm sure.
now? Okay, do you think that the officers uh, deliberately avoiding your radio call, or do you think that they're experiencing auditory exclusion?
Oh, 100% auditory exclusion, and just they're on the backside of the curve at this point.
Okay, what do you anticipate the success of this company, that company getting through this door and up to that floor in this construction site?
I mean, it doesn't look like there's heavy fortifications going on, so I mean they're probably going to have to deal with some plywood and but there's nothing that's jumping out at me from what I'm seeing from that still photo that's going to lend me to believe that they're going to be experiencing significant delays on the way to the fire.
Okay, if you're flowing 2 1 3/4 lines up on this
Hmm.
floor, do you see any indication that they're being successful?
From this still, no. So if they're actually operational, they're not making any headway.
Jay, you have questions for him?
Um, at, so at what point do you have any thought towards exposure protection?
So if you can go back to that the picture that shows the exposure, Chief. So is that that stucco exterior on the exposure?
Yeah, and if you look down here, you can see there's windows on this side of the building.
Okay. So the stucco exterior is definitely going to buy me a little bit of time on the impingement side of things. But if there are windows that are being directly impinged on, I obviously have to address that, which I would definitely get that fifth engine company into that exposure building because you're going to get radiant heat coming through those windows, and at the very least, you're going to get some auto ignition of the fuels on the other side very quickly. So that would be my priority for the fifth due company is getting them into that exposure building.
Okay, other questions, Jay?
Yeah, did you at any point consider an exterior attack with engine 43?
So that's where my head's going right now is with if the transmissions are indicating that they're both lines are operational and I'm seeing no signs of improvement or conversion at all from the outside, then I'm gonna have those guys retreat to an area of refuge. And 43 is actually perfectly in line for a deck gun hit.
Oh, okay. Interesting, but you didn't do that to start with. You're only doing
No.
that now that it appears that you're having trouble. Is it
Yes.
fair? Is it fair if I say that it does not appear to be going the way you would want it to go?
Oh, 100%.
Okay, but you did. Did you consider? Did you think about just doing that with 43 to begin with?
I would like I wanted to actually just get an idea of where the first two engines were in the progress of their attack. If they weren't yet actively pushing or advancing, then I would absolutely default to that because you have fire coming out of six windows. I mean, you have the majority of that floor is well involved, and because we have minimal sheathing on the walls, there's no doors. you're going to have rapid, fire extension and spread throughout that building. So getting a quick knock on it with a large volume of water is going to be very effective here because the window of opportunity here is very small.
Okay, so okay, so we I don't know how long we've been asking you questions, but does it feel like an eternity?
It does feel like a long time. Yeah.
Okay, let's just break out of the TDG part of it, and I
Sure.
want to give you credit for. I mean, you really jumped right in, and I appreciate that, and that's a component of tactical decision games. Um, one of the things I did in there was I gave, like, we when we were here before you assigned Engine 43, I gave you
Hmm.
I you had an opportunity to ask Engine 41 and ask Engine 42, but you did not
Hmm.
take it. Right. So I'm sort of interested. So these are the types of things that happen in TDGs, right?
Hmm.
I don't know for sure what you're going to do or any other student's going to do. I don't know. Unless I'm doing it in an agency where I've, like by the end of the day, I start getting a pretty good handle on how they talk on the radio and those sorts of things. But you had so from a command perspective, right? We're sort of still in learning mode of this particular tactical decision game, and if you're watching online, you can see I'm closing my eyes because I'm thinking about how to ask this question. Is There was a point there where I gave you engine 43, but you hadn't talked to 41 or 42 yet, and in retrospect. Uh, some of your decision making for what 43 should do
Hmm.
is in retrospect is dependent on the communication with 41 and 42,
Absolutely.
right? And so and this is common especially for relatively new chief officers is when companies arrive company so when you're a company and you arrive at an event like this, you want an assignment. Like you want to go to work, and that's what we love about company officers and firefighters is they want to be in this, right? It's not that you're not. I've never met anybody in the service who you're like, have to drag them kicking and screaming into a house fire or a building fire. And so there's some mental pressure that when they arrive, you understand they want an assignment. You have a lot of work that you need to get done. But I would offer you from a command perspective, maybe, and this would be something to consider is if you could just pause 43 long enough to get the information that
Hmm.
you need to know whether or not you need 41 and 42 to do something different, or you can just like, because what you did was you assumed it was going to work. This is my interpretation of what you did. You
Hmm.
assumed it was going to work and you started supporting the plan,
Yeah.
but then it didn't work and you'd
Hmm.
already made the leap. And so
Yeah.
one of those opportunities would be to say, hey, the skill of identifying like, oh, I'm at a critical juncture right now and
Hmm.
my need to collect information is higher than my need to uh, take additional action,
Hmm.
and so pause it. But it's hard especially for newer chief officers because you've never been in the situation.
Hmm.
Your training, your preparation for promotion, all that stuff is uh, forward loaded, right? Like when you get in a company, you're ready to assign them, you're ready to keep track of them. That's in all your prep work. There's this pretty strong mental model that gets built, and then the other element we're fighting against that element, which is your training and your history. And then the other thing that we're sort of fighting against is that when we're doing this in the online environment, we have to recognize that there's no space, right? The time between when you arrived, when 43 arrived, if we went back and looked at the transcript, it's probably something like 5 seconds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And in the real world, you would have a little more space, but you didn't have a mental model that said, if I have space, here's how I'm going to use it,
Right.
right? And so that's what we're doing in TDGs, and then we can step completely out of this. And I'd ask you, did you feel like you were under command pressure?
Yes.
Right. And so this very simple exercise, right? It's just a PowerPoint. And this is actually right now, this is still just, I'm not showing it like as a presentation. I'm using it like when you would build it. And these are just, pictures that I created that I'm just moving around the incident scene, right? That's a ladder. I didn't have to tell you that was a ladder, right? You knew that was a ladder,
Yeah.
right? The hoses, I use these, but I can also go up here and click draw, click blue, right? I can click. That's there's an inch and three quarter, there's a 2.5, there's a LDH, right? So I could have easily just done this and said, oh, pre-connect and you didn't actually. If I we'd have to go back and look, or I could maybe ask Jay knows. Did he tell them to what floor to go to, or did he just tell them
I
which
told
they're
him to go
going
to
to?
three.
He told them to go to three. So you're already
Hmm.
committing to the floor above, actually. Which if I was doing a little bit better job facilitating, that's the nice thing about doing this is that like there's a lot of freedom. And let's say that go back to this one. Let's say that like you and this happens too, right? Like you just really get sideways. And if we were doing coaching right here and you were my only student that I was,
Mhm.
or another thing I do with coaching sometimes is I have like the brand new chief officer from a department and two or three seasoned officers is they'd be like, hey, yeah, what all I would do is if we got sideways like this, I would just go back to here. I would go back to here, which is where we started, and I would just have you start again, right? And I'd give you an opportunity to think about your size up, think about your course of action, how you're going to communicate, and then we would actually run through that, and I would answer for. And what would throw you off the next time is I'd probably answer for engine 41, right? I'd probably say,
Yeah.
give you. I wouldn't give you a good report. I'd give you a bad report. So we keep the mental model of
Yeah.
the fire's not going well. I wouldn't change that, but I would, maybe give you a radio report that fit the bill as far as that goes. So this is this a tactical decision game. I could and Jay, did we do this one when you were in that group sessions I was doing?
We we did, yeah. As soon as you pulled up the second International Boulevard, I was like, "Yeah, this sounds familiar." And then you showed the picture of the building, and I'm like, "Oh, this is the that under construction one." And it's a good one. I mean,
Yeah.
it puts you in a lot of weird binds,
Hmm.
because you're kind of go into it with a predisposition of it's going to be like a normal apartment building or a normal house or something like that. And all of a sudden you've got this little curveball of, oh, it's this under construction. Like, oh, that's different. All right, now hold on a second. And then you kind of go from there. And I like this one because there's a lot of forks in the road
Hmm.
where, if you got kind of a could go this way, could go that way type of a decision to make, and then you proceed from there, and then when you break it down, you go backwards and you kind of reverse engineer it. It's really fun to go back and look at each one of those decision making points of, you could split that one a few different ways. You could, run that fire a few different ways and, probably run it successfully a few different ways. And you could run it not successfully a few different ways. And so this one has a lot of outcomes potentially that are, they're really good. So
Yeah, and Nick and for the audience, all I would do for company officers is take these off. I would back the excuse me, I would back these up and just show engine 41, responding in from up here, right?
Hmm.
And I would just remove these hoses wouldn't these the rest of these just wouldn't be here, right? Uh, and so I'd say, oh, you're arriving, you're the officer of engine 41, right? And so
mhm.
it would be a clean that would be my truck company would obviously be with the right with the ladder. You can see over here I have ladder 42. It's got a team A and a team B, but the way and if this was a first in company officer thing, this is how I would set it up. Said, okay, you're the engine 41 and you're coming in from this direction, right? Or I probably actually because I want you to see this fire, I'd probably say you're engine 42 and you're arriving first. And as you pulled in, I would literally just drag this icon and go, okay, where do you want to stop
Hmm.
engine 42? Right? And you'd say, okay, I want to stop engine 42 right here. Right now I'd have you do all your radio and all that kind of jazz, right? And I'd draw the lines where you put them. If you position for a deck gun attack, right, I would just I would ask you, because sometimes people go, right here, sometimes they go
Hmm.
here, sometimes they go here. Sometimes they say opposite side of the street or near side of the street, right? Each of those gets us things that we can talk about. Um, and whether they go deck gun to begin with or 2.5 to begin with or engine 3/4 interior attacks to begin with, all of those are solutions that company officers have offered to this problem uh,
Yeah.
over the course of time. And even within one session, Jay, maybe why don't you speak to that as far
Yeah.
as being in one session?
Yeah. I mean, I remember doing this one in our group, and there was all of the above. You had inch 3/4 to the floor above. You had inch and 3/4 like, on that same second floor to the backside of the fire. You had guys who wanted to position for a deck gun shot. You had guys who wanted to position kind of to deck gun shot, but also protect the exposure building at the same time.
Yeah,
So
so
like there was,
somewhere in here, right, where you can get
yeah,
water in the gap and in the windows.
yeah, and I liked that each one of those, like, one of my favorite things about the TDG process is that it helps you understand that you don't get something for nothing on the fire ground. Like everything has trade-offs, and so like if you're gonna position for a deck gun shot, uh you're you have crews, like you're putting them in position where you have crews that are technically operating on that floor. And so you get to go through the process of, it's not just as simple as saying, yeah, just take the deck gun shot. Like, all right, well, you have crews that are on the backside of that. Are how do you coordinate with that? You had guys that were, in our session. I remember that I want a deck gun shot and a simultaneous hose stretch at the same time on the Charlie side stairwell. And you go, okay, well, physically, how can your engine company actually do that? And they kind of get to the process like, okay, actually, it sounds like something I can throw out into the ether, like, yes, do this. But then when you break down the mechanics of how would that actually physically look, and they go, okay, I actually couldn't do that, And so it really forces you to see a thought all the way through instead of a lot of, I think, scenario based like sim labs and stuff like that. You kind of get away with, you can just say something and then it just happens magically, and you never really have to deal with the repercussions, the fallout, the ripple effects, whatever you want to call it, of those decisions. And so this is really valuable. And even the wrinkle of, hey, your crew is not responding back to you, which is so common. I mean, almost every single fire you go on, at some point the chief's going to try to get a hold of somebody. They're not going to respond to them, and there's different varying levels of what that means. There's from these guys are in trouble to these guys are ignoring you because they're getting work done to these guys just don't hear you because they're task saturated. And like you handle each one of those differently. And but it's not just like in a lot of scenarios you might hear oh, engine, whoever, they're not responding to you, and you're kind of reflexively forced into this. Well, that's a Mayday situation, right? Like, no, that's not the case. Oh, it can be, but often there are other possibilities as well. And so being able to pull that thread and tease that thought process out so that
Yeah.
when somebody goes on the fire ground, they try to get a hold of a crew, and that crew does not respond to them. They have that slide in their slideshow, or it could be these possibilities, and then they're able to kind of pattern match that a little bit and go, is Is this a mayday? Is this a they're task saturated, they need support? Is it and they've run that play before in their mind, so they're better equipped to actually handle it in the field.
Yeah, Jay, I think that's a great point. Having just gone through the promotional process 6 months ago, that's definitely one of the scars that come with that testing process is, one that getting away with just shooting out a tactic and then it just magically happens without those trade-offs or understanding the ripple effect of that tactic and what that actually entails. So I think this actually forces the practicality of the orders that you're actually giving. And I like where you went with the Mayday situation because that's exactly where my mind went in that moment when he's like, "Oh shit, he just told me that they're not responding." So in like the oral board mindset, you're like, "Oh, they're trying to give me a Mayday," which is like, no, no, no,
Yes.
that's every fire. Like you have a heavily engaged company is probably going to miss their first radio call. Whether
Yeah.
it's because they're just hands on or that's that auditory exclusion, which a fire of that magnitude, that's going to be reality. They're going to be on that backside of the curve because this is definitely a little sporty.
Yeah. Well, and I like
Yeah.
to, with a lot of these TDGs and, Phil, when I went through his online class, like this was one of, I don't remember how many we did, quite a few of them. And none of these are overly complicated. They're pretty, it's something that you can expect it, no matter where you work, to see something like this at some point in your career. So it's not like some abstract, the world is on fire, I'm one in a million type of a fire. Um, but it gives you good, like there's something there for everybody in the process. If you're a chief officer, there's obviously a lot of stuff there. Company officer, there's obviously a lot of stuff there. But you can absolutely, with drivers, with firefighters, I mean, when you start getting into, hey, you are a member of Engine 42 and you got tasked with, pulling that line through that stairwell to, the top floor, whatever, you can get into the, what size line, where are you pulling, how are you going to actually orchestrate this with those three guys. Like you get asked to give a deck gun shot before you go up. Like how would that mechanically work with your crew? How would it play out? You see holes in the operation before you actually get to see the holes in the operation, I guess is kind of what comes out of it. I remember in our TDG with this one, there was um, something about there was a lot of conversation about that engine 42 laying in unsupported off of a hydrant, for a deck gun shot, right? And so you have like that component for drivers about like, well, how far is this block, or what are we talking about here? What is this lay distance? And is that a viable tactic to, if somebody said engine 42 is going to sit there with a deck gun flowing nonstop for exposure protection, what does that look like with this unsupported lay, all that kind of stuff, right? And so there's a lot of different ways you can pull this thread that every single level, from the chief officer to the junior firefighter on the back, like everybody can get something from this and start to shoot holes in kind of their thought process a little bit, challenge their thought process to go like, okay, what are the ripple effects of what my decision might be here, and how would I handle that? Like if I'm going to the floor above and I've got two lines that are ineffective on the floor below me, what what do I do with that? Like you can't do nothing with that. That is a problem. So let's tease out like what does that mean to me and how would I handle that situation?
Yeah, and one of the things um, that I think is sort of important as we're talking about, right, is doing tactical decision games, right? Is and Jay hit the nail on the head. Simple, simple, simple.
Hmm.
You notice that from the fire perspective, I never went past like the first 15 or 20 seconds. And one of the complicating factors is if you want to present uh, a change to this particular fire scene based on these actions, this is what this fire will look like in 5 minutes or 8 minutes or 10 or whatever that time frame is. um, understanding how complex that gets, how fast, because what that will look like is dependent on the actions that the first in takes, and it will depend on the so let's say that engine 42 is first in, and I have an officer. One officer is going to stop and use a deck gun. One officer is going to stop and use a 2.5. Uh, one's going to lay forward and use a deck gun. The other one's going to position there, use the 2.5, and stretch back. The third one's going to go up the stairwell to floor number 2. Right? Each of those has a different outcome that I have to prepare for by having different sims for each of those. Right? So I have to actively be able to change the sim based on the actions of that first company, and then I have to accurately predict what that's actually going to look like in 5 minutes to give you a good mental model of what the future holds. Right. So that when I say, okay, this is 5 minutes later and this has happened, that's a realistic, and it has to actually be in line with a thing that a lot of simulation stuff doesn't even take into account, is if when I'm developing it, if what I present you is different than what you would expect it to be in 5 minutes. Now we're at what I call we're not on the same Disneyland ride anymore, and it doesn't take very much complexity, like Jay said, to like even with chief officers. Like I'll have the first thing companies deployed, like I did for you, Nick, but I don't go past the first one or two assignments after that, because frankly, if the chief officer can get the right position, get the right alarm level called, uh, get the next couple of assignments made, that's a lot of there's a lot of variability there. We could have a discussion, and we probably would have, right? If I had a group of chief officers, we probably would. I would guess, based on the times I've done this before with groups of chief officers, that when when do you need to talk to 41 and 42? How diligent do you need to be in paying attention to them? And at what point do you just assume that they're effed and do
Mm-hmm.
something about it?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Which is
Because
which
those
is
are all possibilities, right? And
yeah.
um, if you call somebody and that's like they're at the very tip of the spear, and this is already dicey, and they don't answer, I would offer my perspective would be that I
Mm-hmm.
would want to maintain due diligence on that one or two. I would want to talk to somebody on floor 2 with a
Hmm.
pretty high level of um, not concern, although I do have concern, but I would remain focused on getting that done until either I got a hold of them or I
Hmm.
reached a tipping point of I'm taking action regardless.
Yep.
And for me, that action would be aggressively flowing water and dealing with the consequences.
Hmm.
Um, because like right now, if I can't talk to them, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
But
And
it,
one of the big things with that to is like the and Chief, I'm sure you get this in a lot of your classes where that like let's just take that one single topic of what do you do when you put something out there on the radio and nobody responds to you, right? And then like how do you view that? How do you and at what point do you consider them like they're in danger? Um, that's going to differ from person to person. And so when you're able to flesh this out in the backside of the process and like Nick and you and I, if we were doing this together, we're able to sit there and go, boy, I don't really know. Like I have a gut feeling of when I would assume they're in danger, but I hear, Phil say, well, I've had this before and this is kind of how I think about it, right? This is my so that TDG process really lends itself towards in the after action review of dipping into the expertise within the room to be able to provide a framework for somebody so that way somebody like me sitting here I've never been in the chief role. I don't know. I don't really have an idea. I would just be relying on gut instinct for something like that. And I can listen to, Chief Joe's go, yeah, I had a fire or whatever. I've had this in the past. Here's at what point this is what makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This is what makes me consider them like they're in trouble versus they're just task saturated versus this. And I go, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now I have that slide in my slideshow for when it happens to me. I'm not just basing it off of, gut instinct.
And sort of an interesting factor too, Jay, that I'll ask you is when this came up and you started to think about it and then you remembered it, did you remember it as a fire or did you remember it as a training exercise?
It's funny actually that you say that because uh, so I remembered it more as a fire. So I've had a couple of under construction fires that were impactful on my career. And then when you did that scenario in our TDG lab, it like brought me right back to that. I'm like, okay, I've had this and something like this. And this TDG, when you brought it back up, um, it made me kind of get back into that mindset and remember those like so my brain just automatically switched towards whatever little section it has devoted towards under construction fires, like it pulled that file out, and so it's kind of funny how that happened quickly because I didn't with the PowerPoint until you showed the picture of the building. It was like, okay, that's kind of familiar. And then you showed the under construction part, and it was like this whole file section just went boop and opened up. It was like, okay, that's right. I remember this. Here we go. But yeah, I think one of the important things with TDGs is to define like what TDGs are not as well, because we're kind of like talking about what they are, but also what they are not. So I think what Phil does a really good job of, and what really was so impactful for me when I first went through your class was that you weren't a lot of traditional sim labs that I've been through up until that point. They were kind of like, almost ushering you towards an outcome, and you don't do that. So when you provide this, you're providing information, you're giving time constraints. Okay, you arrive, you have this many seconds to make this decision until this unit gets on scene, and then you stay true to those time constraints. And so there's the time constraint factor of the TDG. You don't you're not asking for a lot of like elaboration on stuff. You ask for just enough information to be able to ensure that you're getting them correctly and you're just letting them choose their own journey here, and you're guiding them through the process. And the questions aren't like, they're not leading questions of, are you sure you want to do, or something like that, where are you sure? Well, what about where, because a lot of times how this plays out in the companies, you might have a whatever battalion chief who's taking their company officers and their firefighters through something like this, and they go, oh, okay, man, are you sure you want to do that? Why wouldn't you do this instead? And they kind of, okay, whatever, chief, I'll do that. I'll do what you say, right? You're not
Yeah.
doing that. You're letting these thoughts kind of play out all the way through, and you're keeping the time constraint, and you're keeping the evolution moving forward. And then we hot wash it at the end, and that's where all that other stuff flushes out. But I think that it's a really important distinction. And Phil, please, correct me if I'm wrong or elaborate on this further. But I think that's really important why these are different than a traditional scenario a lot of people might be used to.
Yeah. So first I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop sharing so we can so that fire's not sort of distracting us from the general stuff that we're talking about here. And I think there's a couple of things there, Jay, that you nailed on the head. So the first one is my experience as well with uh, sim labs, and I've been through a lot of them. Right. I mean, they're not just a professional curiosity of mine, but as a trainer, I'm always looking for opportunities to say, okay, this works. Why does this work? Why does that work? All this other kind of stuff, right? virtually every time I've been through a sim lab, there's been some sort of garden path. You're not, in my mind at least, you're not actively fighting the fire. You're trying to discover what the garden path is,
Hmm.
and so to me, there's something about that that I just don't like. I don't think I think that if I really thought about the research and some other stuff, I could probably come up with some, verifiable data, blah blah blah, right? But I don't want to indicate that though that research and all that stuff doesn't matter, because I think most of it reinforces what we're talking about here. Is that you try, if you noticed up front, Nick, like I'm trying to say, okay, I'm trying to give you the information you would normally have when you're responding to an event,
Right.
right? The companies, some, like in your city, if I gave you an address, a lot of those you'd have a pretty good idea what that building's going to be before you even get there. Now it might be different, but you're going to be pretty accurate most of the time, right? And so you're trying to lay a framework that says, hey, I understand what's going on, and there's also the framework of everybody who's participating as a student. You're trying to keep them on that same Disneyland ride. So um, to create something that has a change and a change and a change, you almost by default end up with a garden path, because the complexity to create all that stuff and the time needed and the active management required. I mean, that's why if you do that sort of thing, right, you need the $20 million sim center, and you need full-time employees to manage it, right? Who know how to use Fire Studio for actively during an event to change what the outcomes are that you're seeing, to reflect the actions that you as the incident commander take on the fireground, right? And so I just and I don't feel like the complexity of the discussion or the complexity of the thinking or the complexity of the challenges that I'm presenting there's zero correlation between those and the complexity of the scenario itself as I present it. And there's a ton of research on that the there are some things that require high fidelity exercises.
Mhm.
What we're doing is not one of them. And there's industries that can afford that. I mean, you look at an airplane simulator is a probably $100 million investment. Crashing a plane costs $8 billion or something like that, right? So the economy of scale there is outside. I mean, this not something the fire department should be pursuing, because everybody's got limited budgets, and you can put these things together, and that's why I'm in the middle of writing the book about them. Is like how do you do what I'm doing at that's scalable, repeatable, low cost, high
Hmm.
impact. It can be, you can go from a quick 5 to 10 minute thing to, like, typically I do scenarios like this. I rarely go more than 90 minutes on a scenario. And I can tell you it's difficult not to have them go at least 1 hour, even if you're
Hmm.
just talking about one set of decisions. And like, if I had multiple chiefs here, Nick, and we would have run through yours, we would have spent on debriefing it, we probably would have spent 20, 30 minutes. And then I would wipe the board clean, go back to another student, and start the process from the beginning with somebody who, when they got there, they had a different plan, right?
Hmm.
And very often people will, while we're talking about your plan, they're thinking about their plan, going, "Ooh, that doesn't look so good anymore," right? Like they're actively adjusting what they think they would do in the same situation.
Yeah.
So that garden path is one piece of it, and then Jay, you also, but well, let's just. There's another piece, Jay, that you talked about that I think is super important to cover. But before we leave that garden path thing, what is your guys' reaction to that idea?
So the thing that for me that stands out of what makes this so much more valuable than the traditional simulation lab is that it is the intentionality piece. Like there's a lot of things that you take for granted when you're in that simulation environment because of that set garden path already kind of laid out, and it's almost like it's the cheat code, for the evolution. Where this is there's that real life cause and or that simulated real life cause and effect of you actually have to consider and also you know communicate what the implications of the decisions that you're making are. Again, that going back to that ripple effect. And one, like, can you legitimately do it with the resources and, given the scenario? And then what's going to be the downstream effect of that? And even for me too, just the being deliberate with your process of when you get there. So I think with the sim lab, you take certain things for granted or kind of overlook certain things. Or I think this is more allows you to focus more on like in being more intentional about what you have to do. So really shoring up the steps within the mental model of your procedure. Because when you asked me, well, did you touch base with 41 and 42? And in my head, I was like, oh, if I was on scene, I would have like instinctively done that. But now this forces you to deliberately do that every time, and you have to think about that. Where if I saw lines going off of a truck into the house, especially if they were charged, like my instinct would be, I need to find out if they're flowing water if I can't tell from the outside. So where in this, because now after that first run through and me not communicating that to you on my own, now that's encoded in my head is okay. I need to be intentional about making sure that I contact those companies that are actively engaged to find out what their progress is. Are they flowing water? Are they, based off of what they're telling me, does it match what I'm seeing on the outside? Are they winning? Because like you said, that was that fork in the road, that critical period where, especially given the under construction and the interior conditions prior to the fire, things are going to escalate very rapidly. And this, like you said, it's already a sporty event. So for like that would have been that critical juncture. Was the priority was what's the progress of 41 and 42? Are they flowing water? Because if that's the case and that's the conditions I'm seeing, they're not winning. So
You're right.
that's that immediate, okay, we need to make a hard left. My instinct there would be, retreat to the area of refuge, so that front stairwell, so they can isolate themselves. And then 43 is in perfect position for a deck gun shot to be able to get rapid
Mhm.
water to, knock down the bulk of that fire and, check the auto exposure as well as if they position right, they can also get initial exposure protection as well. So you can really get a 3-for-1 potentially with how you set that 43's apparatus up to at least punch this thing in the mouth and give you a little wiggle room. And then now those two lines are in position to then once we put this thing down, knock this thing down a peg. Now they can redeploy, and they've got a much more competitive advantage. And now, 43 can still be stretching that line because depending on how your rig's set up, potentially the driver could be getting that deck gun into operation initially by themselves and still allow that line to be stretched, whether it's to the floor above or to that exposure, depending on what the priority is based off of what I'm seeing. But yeah, that's to me that was the gold in that in the learning experience there for me is that intentionality of recognizing that you're at a, a crossroads strategically or tactically and potentially strategically of if you don't address this now, things can very quickly go sideways.
Yeah, so that's where, that getting off that garden path. The other thing that you talked about, Jay, was that the the whoever's running it they have an idea of what should be done. right?
Hmm.
They have a plan. They think this is the right plan, and they expect you. What they expect is for you to tell them the plan that they already have in their head. And when you don't do that, they don't like it very much. And
Hmm.
uh, I can tell you, I made that mistake when I first started this a couple of times, and it's an easy mistake to make when you first start facilitating because you're stuck in the mode of thinking about the tactics instead of thinking about running the exercise. You actually have to get over that get over that fence and get onto the things like because what you're really looking to do before I get off that is that and people hate that if you have a way you want it done, just tell them, right? Just tell them how you want it done. And certainly you can go to plenty of tactics classes, whether it's at the major conferences or, the regional. I mean, like people come in and say, this is how you should fight fire. Um, but I have enough experience to know that there's a lot of places, and I would say the majority of places in a single family residential fire will use the front door as their automatic. There are some places that use the back door and they as the standard normal way of fighting fires in houses. 1 and 2 story houses, their go-to is the back door, and they have reasons why it's the back door, and they're effective using the back door. But if you come in there and go, yeah, if you're not using the front door, you're all left up. You've just lost however much effort that person made to come to your class is gone. And if they work for you, they're not gonna participate. They're gonna they're what they're looking for the garden path. The garden path they're looking for is whatever the chief wants, right? They're just trying to pair what they think you want to hear because you're not genuinely interested in what they think, and we're trying to get to what they think, and that giving people just enough rope to hang themselves. And man, I can tell you, they can spot it.
Hmm.
If you're on the
Well,
student side of that equation,
Yeah,
man, you know exactly what's going on.
for
And
sure.
yeah.
a variance of that, which is critically, I mean, it's just will kill the session 100%. Is if you have a company officer, and sometimes when I have these groups, right, I'll put the company officer in the junior company officer in the hot seat with the expectation that they're going to make a couple of mistakes. And I
Hmm.
want them to make mistakes because this is a training ground, right?
Hmm.
And worst case scenario is somebody who is full of their own ego, and particularly if they have bugles on their shoulder, to just hammer that person directly in front of their peers. Oh my God. I mean, that kind of stuff and that's normal. Like if you're a good instructor, that kind of stuff can happen. But because of the necessity of students to buy into your TDG process, you have to tread what you said, Nick, was deliberately, and you have to tread. You can't be soft, but you must be careful. And I've
Hmm.
never really put it that way before, so I think I'm gonna trademark that. And like you can't be soft, but you have to be careful, and you have to come at it with true interest, true curiosity about what the underlying thinking is. And
Yeah.
I mean, Jay mentioned another thing too, right? These you identify these disconnects. I mean, I love going into a department working with company officers, and company officer one, they get there first. They're temporarily in command, so the battalion chief arrives. They give a couple of orders on the radio, and then I don't ask them what they want that company to do. I go to another officer and says, based on the order he gave, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And there's often disconnect there, right?
Yeah.
That what they do is not what that person wanted. Now, if it's close enough, it's close enough. But if it's not close, then what we've identified is we do not have a common language that we all understand in order to understand what the objectives are that we're trying to achieve and how we're going to communicate those effectively, so that what if I'm the one making the decisions, I'm charged with that, and I'm making those decisions, the ability to communicate that stuff on the radio is a skill. It's a
Hmm.
skill all its own, right?
Hmm.
And so we're able to practice those skills in context to make those radio reports short, timely, relevant, accurate, right? To achieve the objective that we want to achieve without becoming prescriptive. I was having a discussion with a guy the other day, and it was like he's telling people which hydrant to take. Like I'm just telling you, I don't care. You get a supply.
Yeah.
Right? That's your job. If you don't know
Yep.
how to do that, we haven't done what we need to do on the training ground, right?
Hmm.
Um, Me like going through the process of figuring out where you're coming from, which hydrant you're going to drive by. Like I'm making a bunch of assumptions that you're coming from where I thought you were coming from, right?
Hmm.
And if you're not, and you're in a situation where, let's say you're coming from a different direction than you normally would because you were on an aid run, it was 3 in the morning, and Chief didn't even know you were out of quarters, which happens all the time, right? Now all of a sudden, for you to do what they want you to do, you got to go 4 blocks out of your way.
Hmm.
Like I guarantee you that's not what that person wants, right? And so there's degrees of prescriptiveness necessary to achieve objectives, but then there's also giving people, making things your business that are not your business, that we do out of habit, because we haven't been sort of called on it in the training environment or given an opportunity to correct the mental model in the training environment, whatever it is.
Yeah, and
Well,
I
So
and one,
think
go ahead, Nick.
so. I think one of the other major values of the TDGs too is to provide that perspective between ranks, and this is something that really got highlighted in we did an after action review my last shift from the fire we had from the previous week, and one of our truck captains made a tremendous point at the end of the after action review as we were talking about communications, and uh, he made it a point that when we were talking about the interior crews, especially the ones that are at that tip of the spear, of being deliberate about tr basically painting the picture of the interior for the incident commander, is providing good quality, reports as to what they're facing for conditions, because that is going to, really provide the incident commander with an idea of how this is tracking, because our senior deputy had told me, like, well, the things that he's doing to evaluate the fire from the exterior is what am I hearing from the crews on the inside? What am I seeing from the outside? And do those two things match? And
yeah,
how much time has elapsed? And are we winning or losing? Like that was really his whole matrix for figuring out the trajectory of the fire. And that one little point about making the company officers aware of how important it is to provide that imagery for the incident commander, because we're only seeing that exterior view, and we're relying on them to fill in those gaps of what they're actually facing, because now, you know my shift commander when I was a company officer always kind of explained this logic to me. He's like, hey, because I have plan A is in motion, but I'm already starting to line up those contingencies if things start to go sideways. And what allows, especially if things are dicey, like in this situation where you have, a very well off fire in a building under construction. Like there's a lot of factors that are working against us here. And if for me, this is already going to be that marginal deal where I'm going to be ready to pull that pin. That's already in my calculus. Where now, if I'm getting those reports of, hey, we have a heavy volume of fire, we're getting water on it, we're making a push, we're getting it. Well, now it's like, okay, if you're getting, you think you got it, but you don't, or
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
or again, if I'm seeing some conversion, they're getting water on the fire, I'm like, now I'm going to be put more at ease. So depending on what they're saying, if that matches, that's going to allow me to have that comfortability to allow them to continue working if it is one of those, on the fence type of deals. Or it's just going to give me the validation to, like, at this this scenario we did, where we're at that critical juncture of now if they're telling me this, now you made the decision easy for me, and now I know I have to switch gears.
Yeah, and you correctly identified that there's always two sides there, right? Because the person outside can't see what's going on inside, and the person inside can't see what's going on outside. I've had situations where company officers are saying, "Hey, the fire's under control," and I'm looking at the building going, "No, no, it's not." Right? So we're disconnected, and that's what one of the things that I think is that you said is like for me would be a prime thing is like when there's a disconnect between what I think I should be getting and what I'm actually getting, that's when, like if my expectations and reality start to separate, then I got a problem. Right. And the reality of most firefights is that if I look at my expectations and my reality, they typically stay tightly aligned. And if expectations will sometimes, right, like I won't be meeting the expectations, but I'll be close, then they're still pretty close together. I'm in pretty good shape. But my experience is that the further I get from having my expectations met, the worse it is. And it's like in my world, it's like in my mind at least, it's like an exponential scale. And really then you're trying to figure out like how far apart can these things be before I have to change the strategy or do something different. And if I have to do that, how do I do that? Because in the example that we have here, I could very easily have just told you, you call engine 41 calls you on the radio and they tell you, hey, boss, we're not even out of the stairwell yet, right? Because that happens too sometimes, right? You
Yeah.
got two companies in the stairwell with inch and three quarters. I mean, I've been in that stairwell where it's like, like that just becomes it's a like we can't even open the door right now because of the mess we have in this stairwell, right? And or they get part way out and then they figure out, oh, we can't advance anymore, right? We're going to have to, like, those things happen, and that would give us an opportunity to go, this is why we want to make sure we're stretching in stairwells. If we're going to stretch multiple lines in stairwells, we want to do that on a regular basis. So the everybody at that level who does that task understands how that works intrinsically. So
Mhm.
it's like stretch and short. Like I've been at fires where the first line is short. Well, guess what? The second line's short too, right? And how do you fix
Yeah.
that, right? So
Yeah.
it gives you these things that you can go to the training ground and you can go, okay, yeah, it wasn't a fire, but good thing it wasn't on fire, because if we had this effed up thing in the stairwell, which we've had before, we would have lost that building. And so let's make
One.
sure we don't have that. Let's discover that that's a potential area of failure
Hmm.
from doing a TDG, and then it becomes vividly clear for those company officers why that skill set's so important, if it wasn't already, right?
Hmm.
And when was the last time we did it? When was the last time I did it with engine 41? And when was the last time I did it with engine 47? And what, right? Like it gives you all this fodder to train on day in and day out, that makes that process, I think, as a company officer, at least my memory of it is like sometimes like, God, it'd be nice to do something that's both practical and different,
Hmm.
that I haven't touched on recently, or that we haven't, that might be a little bit of an outlier. If you don't spend a lot of time operating two hand lines and stairwells, and there are plenty of fire departments out there that do that day in, day out, and are going, "Oh, that's easy because we do it all the time." It's easy because you do it all the time, right? If
Yeah.
this is something that you're planning to do, but your company hasn't done it with another company in more than 6 months, then I would offer you've got a real potential to have that become a relatively negative outcome. So
Yeah.
anyway,
We, one of the, well, I guess there's a couple of like main benefits that we've found with starting to incorporate TDGs regular, on a regular basis. So you've got your like, um, the company level, like for myself and my company being able to do these on a regular basis, it gets us kind of in that hive mind, like where we become a lot more synchronized as one brain with all of us a little bit more because we do these on a regular basis. So you see a lot of like the anticipation, the expectation, all that kind of stuff, the gap closes, right? The like we look at fire similarly because we do TDGs regularly. And so I can, and I it gets me a feel for, when I'm anticipating the water supply is going to get handled by my driver, he kind of likes to handle it in these ways. And like he's comfortable. I trust him to do it on his own and just let me know if he needs help. But I know it's going to get done in probably these ways because we've run that from a training division perspective. We found a ton of value right out of the gate when we started doing these. One of the things that came up was um, we go vertical with hose a lot in our city, and we'll do like different versions of drop bag and drop hose and some of these different types. And a lot of them, what the TDG process does really well is that it in the after action, you get to flesh out some of these details of exactly how you chose to go vertical, or when this guy said we're going to do a coupling drop, and you find out that meant to this company that they were going to take 2.5 hose bundles up and drop them down, and this company was going to do it with 1.75 inches. So you've got these expectation of which coupling's coming down the side of the building to that driver who's going to meet them and make the connection and going like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. So what we found out for us was like, we go vertical a lot. Well, we have about 30 different ways of going vertical. And is that a good thing? Well, there's a lot of great options, and a lot of these are very like, relatively equal options, but is it a good thing departmentally to have that many options? And we are like, no, let's start trimming some of these and get it down to, the top three or whatever. Like how do we want to, when somebody says, I'm going to do a coupling drop, what does that mean? And so that way you can actually, it allowed us to identify those gaps from a training division perspective. And then the engine truck committees meet up and go, okay, we have a problem. How are we going to address this? What do we trim it down to? What ways are the ways that we want to focus on? And um, when you got that like garden path style of scenario, one of the things that stuck out to me that became very evident with that was people's motivations, right, wrong, or otherwise, in making decisions in scenario based environments can sometimes, so like you'll have somebody who they're nervous about the crowd. They're making a decision based on what they think the crowd wants to hear. You'll have some people who may make a decision based on what they think the chief wants to hear. You'll have people who make a decision because they want to personify the really aggressive firefighter. You'll have, like different people are going to have these different motivations that kind of, and in that garden path environment, you're not really, and held accountable is probably the wrong term, but it's the one that pops into my head. You're not really held accountable for the ripple effects of your decision to tease out like what that would actually entail. And and then to kind of flesh it out further is okay, well, now you chose this path, now we're down this route, like now you have this decision. And so I think the beauty of the TDG process, a mentor of mine a long time ago told me, and he's a guy that you guys probably know, John Tanaka. He always would say that somebody's only somebody's only going to learn what they're going to learn when they're ready to learn it. And the TDG process, when you do it right, and you're not like constricting them, confining them with, here's how I would do it with your predetermined outcome, like a garden path, you bring a person down a road, you let them take their road, and whatever motivations, whatever, everything that's influencing their decisions along the way, they get to this from A to Z, they get to these points, and then you walk back the after action review, and they come to a self-realization process. They self-correct more often than not, right? And because like they know in real time, you know what, I should have zigged when I chose to zag, or I should have gone this way, could have gone that way, and they self-correct. And that process, if you want to impact change, getting somebody to the point where they self-correct themselves is like the pinnacle of change. You can tell somebody to do something some way, but if they just get themselves through that process of like self-realization of, you know what, that wouldn't work out. I need to do this. This is why the impact is tenfold. And so I think it's training divisions, especially, and I would make the argument from a company level, based on my experience, that it's incredibly important for company officers to do this with your crews routinely. But training divisions, especially, should be incorporating TDGs regularly because it doesn't just install uh, good like tactical hygiene with your department. It also will reveal all of the gaps that are going to focus your training needs and kind of give you your hierarchy of needs there going forward. Or else it gets you out of that. Well, this is just the next thing on the quarterly checklist. Check, you know, like you can actually now tailor your training needs to meet the department where they're at and go, yeah, we've got 30 different ways of going vertical with hose. So guess what we're doing next quarter? We're spending a bunch of time honing in. We're putting stopwatches to stuff like what we got to trim the fat out of this and we got to focus on, and we want to come out with the end result being a narrower definition of going vertical with hose so that we can be better at those as opposed to all over the board now.
Yeah, there's a huge diagnostic component to all this, and being able to then deliver prescriptive training from what you identify in these TDGs as being vulnerabilities or areas that need to be shored up. And the thing that with Jay and everything that you were talking about too, which uh, what such a huge element of success with all of this, and Chief Joe's correct me if I'm wrong, but is like it's the cultural, there's such a huge cultural aspect that needs to be that's involved in this in order for it to be successful, in the sense that there needs to be that environment that is conducive to that learning, and not viewing the where there isn't that threat or fear of failure, which again is there's going to be a little apprehension, and there's going to be a little bit of that to some degree that you won't be able to eliminate just because of the social pressures and the competitiveness of the people in the fire service. But it's looking at instead of looking at it as an opportunity to lose, if you will, it's an opportunity to learn. And the quote that instantly popped in my head, and I was able to pull it up real quick, was uh, Marine Corps General Krulak, who it had this perfect quote to really capture the essence of everything that Jay just talked about, which is, a challenging yet supportive environment conducive to the expression of initiative, tolerant of mistakes, and unsullied by any vestige of zero defects mentality is essential to effective training. And
Mm.
that's really is just creating that environment of, like allowing for mistakes to occur, and almost not encouraging it, but just viewing them as opportunities of, hey, we want, like, if you're going to fail, we want it to happen here, because we're always our own biggest critics, and the failures are always the memories that are so strong and so impactful in our long-term memory. So if we can allow these failures to occur in the controlled environment, in the supportive environment of training, and among our peers, then we can again diagnose them, treat them appropriately, and then move the entire organization forward from that.
Yeah, I think there's the main thing that you're both recognizing, and where I think TDGs actually have the most value, and the reason that I'm trying to get the fire departments to adopt the methodology, is that you do incrementally change the organization over a long period of time. You identify problems, you can fix those problems, those will result in new problems that you can fix those problems, and on and on and on, right? What I love is that you're both talking about this supportive fire department environment. But I think it's important that we talk to somebody who doesn't have that. And one of the points that that I talk about in the book is, if you want to do TDGs, do them. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You don't have to get anybody's support. You've seen how easy I can do it. I mean, I literally will. You can draw a house on a whiteboard with a street in front of it and a little blue H for a hydrant, and put a fire on floor two in the Charlie Delta corner with a red marker and go to work. And I would love it if everybody out there had this really nice supportive environment where everybody's going to go along to get along and everybody's got a positive attitude about training. But that's not only is that not reality for some people, I think it's unfortunately it might be a fairly consistent model for a lot of people. I don't think, I hope not most, but certainly a high percentage. It certainly was the culture that I came into when I started in the fire department. So, one of the beauties I think that TDGs offer the person who's truly interested in incremental change over a long period of time, but does not have a lot of institutional power, is you don't need, you can just start doing them and you're going to suck at them. Right? It's like any other skill. And we're going to have to get going pretty soon, but like any other skill, if you start and practice, and if you have somebody, if you have one other person to mutually support you that can help you develop your ability to be the person that's running the exercise, you can improve your skill relatively quickly, and you will begin to get traction. Even if you're only getting traction in your own company, even if you're only, if you can leverage that to the rest of your house, and then leverage that to the rest of your battalion, and leverage that to, right, like if you start producing excellence, people are going to be drawn to you, and if they're not, that's okay too, because you're producing excellence. And I'm not saying that the TDGs are the be all end all, but I would say my experience is that they're a very simple yet amazingly powerful tool once you have invested in the process and can do them and recognize you're going to make mistakes, you're going to piss people off, you're going to, I have a thing I say that you're going to dig yourself into holes, right? You're going to accidentally face palm people, you're going to, grenades are going to go off in your face, like all sorts of things are going to happen to you, and you just keep on getting incrementally better at designing tactical decision games and delivering tactical decision games, and you're going to produce excellence.
Hmm. Well, I know, Chief, you got to get going here, so we don't want to hold you up too much, but wanted to real quick before we let you go, um, plug you've got the fire engineering tactical decision games. Is it three of them out now?
Yeah, I think there's actually, they're going every 2 weeks and we're actually way ahead, right? So
Okay.
sometimes I forget where we are on the posting because I'm working on the one for, 6 weeks
Hmm.
from now or 8 weeks from now or whatever the case may be. But they should be going up every 2 weeks on Wednesdays. They're self-directed tactical decision games. They're not highly complex. They're designed for first-end decision makers, right? So we don't have anywhere it's going to be the battalion chief arrive. I mean, unless you're a battalion chief arrives first, right? Then you can do that. But they're self-directed. There's not a feedback loop, but you can also leverage those with a couple of people, and they're simple simulation based, and you can also just pull up any. Like I said, you can draw a fire on a whiteboard or pull up any video of a fire and do essentially what I did with Nick today. I mean, I have 20 seconds of video. I went online and found the address. Right, I looked at the street signs on the video and found the thing on Google Earth and took some Google Earth pictures. But you don't have to get that complicated. The main thing is to start doing them. Right,
Yeah.
that's the main thing, is to start doing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Chief, you alluded to it earlier, or you mentioned it briefly in passing. Was you have a manuscript in the works for a book on tactical decision making games? So essentially, the written, in-depth version of what we've done over the last two podcasts here. So, can you give the listeners a brief little rundown of what that book's going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, assuming someone wants to publish it, right? That'll that'll be the sort of the next hurdle. But I've got that up for my own internal peer review. I've got, you guys are taking a look at it and giving me feedback, and I have a bunch of individuals who are actually typically I'm trying to work in teams, have two people in the same organization to give us that feedback loop, what I call the wingman, right? So everybody's flying with a wingman. It's my ideal, and I also have a pretty well respected chief officer who's using it as a tool for a group of training officers to see if they can, what they can offer me to make the book better based on the way it looks right now. And it doesn't. I'll tell people it comes with a few tactical decision games for you to get started, but it's not a big book of TDGs. It's a big book of how to do it, and because you know. Each TDG is not inherently difficult to design or time consuming, but there is a lot of there's a fair amount of local information that you are going to know way better than I'm going to. And I know I happen to know where Nick is, and I have a group of TDGs, and I tried to pick one that I thought would represent a building that's pretty close to what he could see in his jurisdiction. And because he's a new chief officer, giving him a very challenging first in. That was a very complex thinking required. Very simple scenario design, but very complex thinking required, right? So there are some TDGs. There are going to be some TDGs that are just like out of the can. You can get started on trying it, but it's mostly about how to design them. And really, the focus is primarily on how to deliver them. Questions to ask, questioning strategies, problems you're going to see, and then how to build an interior inside your organization to start with excellence and build a cadre of people who are committed to the process of training in a way that's effective. And hopefully you can move your entire organization. But if you don't, like I said, you're still you just keep producing excellence, man. You're doing what the oath requires, right? That's to me, that's what matters. I do believe it'll have a big impact in a lot of places, but if I get it published, and I expect that that's probably likely. But as you know, Nick, the distance from here to there on time is probably at least a year, realistically. But I've got articles out there, and certainly I'm teaching the class places, and that gives you some exposure to it. And so hopefully we'll see that in some organized version before I expire.
Awesome. Awesome.
That touching on that excellence was, I couldn't envision a better way to end the episode here. Is that really is the essence of what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast is, provide the framework, the decision-making framework for folks out there to, not provide that garden pathway, but to you give them the mental models and, the confidence and uh, the means to work through these different challenges, because as we all know, the fire ground is an incredibly dynamic environment and with varying degrees of complexity. And having these flexible frameworks are what's going to allow people to be successful in the moment. And these TDGs are such an excellent way of exercising that and honing that. So, Chief, I can't thank you enough for once again, being so generous with your time and sharing your expertise with everyone and making us all better. Because, and again, Jay and I have some selfishness in this endeavor, and we get to pick the brains of so many good people, and to have you as one of my personal mentors, to be able to spend even more time with you is always just such a blessing. So thank you again for that.
It was my pleasure, and thanks for having me. Obviously, I like talking about this stuff, and I'm glad you're finding value.
Oh, for
Yeah,
sure.
very much so.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in once again, and listen up for the next episode coming down the pike. So, all right, everyone, take care and stay frosty.